Dara stood in front of the Dusharak building, holding her small handbag tightly. It was her first day and her heart beat fast. She had always been curious about the world beyond Nigeria. From a young age, she found herself fascinated by Korean culture, and now, she finally had the chance to work for a Korean company. She walked inside and followed the receptionist's directions to the conference room, where other new employees were gathering for orientation. Not long after, the door opened and a young man entered. His name was introduced as Min Ho, the director sent from Korea to oversee the new branch. The assistant explained he was the son of the company's founders. Min Ho gave a short bow before speaking. Welcome to Dusharak. I know many of you are beginning today, and I hope you find this company as a place to grow. I look forward to working with you. The words were polite, but his voice held no excitement. As he finished, Min Ho glanced briefly across the room. For a split second, his eyes met Dara's and she did not look away. Something about his presence made her curious. Why did he seem so unwilling to be here? Min Ho went to take his seat without showing any sign of interest in the audience. Inside, he was already counting the days he would remain in Nigeria. After finishing college in America, he had expected to return home to Korea, to finally take his place in the main company. But somehow he ended up here, far from his friends and the streets he grew up on. He did not know this country, its culture, or the way business was done here. The faces staring at him made him feel like an outsider, except for one who stood out in his mind, the young woman who had looked straight at him without flinching. Throughout the orientation, Dara paid attention, taking notes and preparing herself for the tasks ahead. But her mind kept returning to Min Ho. She wondered what kind of leader he would be. Dara had expected her first week at Dusharak to be hard, but she had not imagined how quickly the work would pile up. She sat at her desk, her eyes moving back and forth over the figures in the report. She had corrected the same page 3 times, yet something still didn't add up. She didn't want anyone to see her struggling on her second week, but the report refused to make sense. From across the room, Min Ho did notice. At first, her constant pen tapping irritated him, but then he noticed she wasn't giving up. For someone so new, her persistence was unusual. Against his better judgment, he stood and walked over. "You're adding the totals twice," he said, pointing out the mistake. She looked up, startled, and quickly corrected it. The relief on her face was clear, and when she smiled at him in thanks, it caught him off guard. He found himself staring a second too long before stepping back. When the office clock struck noon and people began heading out for lunch, he walked toward her desk instead of retreating into his usual distance. "It's the lunch break. Would you like to eat with me? I'd like the company." Dara blinked, surprised. He didn't seem like the type to invite anyone, but she smiled and said, "Sure, I'd like that." They walked out of the office together. Dara was still a little surprised by his invitation, but she smiled as they headed to the cafeteria. The cafeteria was busy, but Min Ho helped her find a small table in the corner. They sat down, ready to eat and talk, while the noise of the other people around them faded into the background. After lunch, Dara returned to her desk, feeling a little lighter from the break. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly as she focused on her tasks, finishing reports and preparing her presentation. Later that day, most of the staff had already gone home, and Dara was still putting the final touches on her presentation when she noticed Min Ho's office light was still on. Curious, she walked over and saw him sitting behind his desk, papers spread out in front of him. She hesitated at the door. "You're still working?" she asked. Min Ho glanced up briefly. "So are you." She smiled faintly. "I thought I was the only one who worked too much." Min Ho leaned back in his chair, dropping his pen with a sigh. Without meaning to, he admitted that his parents hadn't sent him to Abuja to relax. Dara, curious, asked why he was really there. He stayed quiet for a while, as if deciding whether to answer. Finally, he explained that his parents wanted him to manage the branch, to prove himself before taking on more responsibility back in Korea. He confessed that he had wanted to return home, but that wasn't an option. Dara thought about his words and told him that maybe he could try to make the best of his time there. Then she stood, saying she should let him get back to work, and wished him good night. Min Ho glanced at the clock and pointed out how late it was. He didn't think it was safe for her to go home alone, so he offered to drive her. Dara hesitated for a moment, then agreed with a small nod, thankful for his concern. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when Miho's phone buzzed, showing his mother's name. Mrs. Kim reminded him that Ji Soo, his future wife-to-be, had arrived in Abuja. He was expected to meet her and bring her to the office on Monday, where she would be working for a few months. Frustration rose at the thought. There was no desire to see her, no interest in being around her, yet his mother's tone left no room for refusal. The instructions were clear: treat Ji Soo politely and make sure she was comfortable. Min Ho ran a hand over his face and let out a slow breath. Further arguments would lead nowhere. Picking her up was the only option. Within the hour, Min Ho was on his way to the airport, thinking about how to handle Ji Soo's visit. At the terminal, he saw her waiting with her bags, her face brightening the moment she noticed him. She rushed over and talked the whole way to the car. Ji Soo spoke about her plans, how much she wanted to meet his team, and even shared some ideas she had prepared. During the drive, she kept pointing out things in the city and laughing at her own comments. Min Ho stayed polite, but his mind was elsewhere. He had no real interest in what she was saying. Monday morning arrived, and Min Ho drove Ji Soo from her hotel to the office. Over the past few weeks, he and Dara had grown closer. They had shared lunches, brief conversations, and moments in the office that made them more comfortable around each other. Dara's presence had become familiar and easy for him, and some staff had started to notice their growing friendship. When they reached the main floor, Min Ho introduced Ji Soo to the staff, telling them she would be working with them in Abuja for the next few months. Ji Soo stepped forward with a warm smile, greeting everyone and saying she was excited to work together. The staff noticed her right away. Some commented on how nice she seemed, while others admired her confidence. By the end of the morning, it was clear she had already left a strong impression on the office. As the day went on, rumors began to spread among the staff. Some said Ji Soo was the boss's wife-to-be, which explained why she would be staying for a few months. The more the gossip spread about Min Ho working with his fiancée, the more Dara's name came up. People started questioning her closeness to him, whispering that she was always by his side and might even be jealous of Ji Soo. Ji Soo caught pieces of these whispers. She watched Dara and Min Ho closely, noticing how naturally they worked and spoke with each other. It was clear to her that their connection went beyond the usual boss and staff relationship, and the thought stirred a quiet jealousy inside her. Over the next few days, Ji Soo made sure she was involved in every meeting. Whenever Dara spoke, Ji Soo would smile politely. "That's a good point, but in Korea we usually," she would add, smoothly changing the direction of the conversation. Her tone was always kind, so no one could say she was rude. Still, Dara's ideas started to get less attention, and her voice was quietly pushed aside. One Saturday afternoon, Dara was walking through a grocery store aisle, scanning the shelves for ingredients. When she turned a corner, she spotted Min Ho a few feet away. He stood there looking confused, holding a couple of items in his hands. Dara smiled as she walked up to him and teased him about how lost and out of place he looked. Min Ho gave a small embarrassed laugh and admitted that he wanted to cook a Nigerian meal but didn't know which ingredients to pick. Dara quickly offered to help him. Relieved, he let her guide him through the aisles. She pointed out the ingredients, explained what each one was for, and laughed whenever he mispronounced a word or picked up the wrong item. Min Ho listened closely, enjoying her patience and the way she made everything sound simple. After a while, Dara suggested something better. She could make the dish for him and teach him how to do it properly. That way, he could learn directly from her. Min Ho was pleased by the idea and agreed, grateful for her help and secretly glad for more time with her. When they arrived at his apartment, Dara unpacked the ingredients and placed them neatly on the counter. Once everything was ready, they began cooking together. Conversation came easily, moving from favorite foods to childhood memories, and even little observations about life in Abuja. Min Ho found himself sharing things he hadn't told anyone before, appreciating how attentively Dara listened. She laughed at his stories and teased him lightly, and he realized he was smiling more than he had expected. At one point, she struggled to reach a spice on a high shelf. Min Ho stepped behind her and helped her grab it. Dara froze for a moment, noticing how close he was. The moment lasted a little longer than needed, and he became aware of her in a way that felt different from before. When their hands touched again while reaching for utensils, Min Ho leaned closer and he pressed his lips softly to hers. The kiss was gentle. They stepped back and smiled, both realizing they were attracted to each other. By the time the dish was finished, Min Ho tasted it and nodded with a genuine smile. He told Dara that it was really good and that she had made it perfectly. Dara felt her cheeks warm at his praise and replied softly that she was glad he liked it. Later, Min Ho drove her home. They exchanged small smiles and occasional glances. The afternoon had shifted something between them, and both felt it without saying a word. Dara had finally been given the chance to lead an important project, securing a local supplier partnership for Dusharak. She worked tirelessly, staying late at the office and checking every detail twice. She was confident everything was ready. But just a few days before the presentation, disaster struck. One morning, when she logged in to review her work, all her files were gone. Deleted. She searched every folder and backup, but there was no trace. Then came worse news. The supplier she had worked so hard to secure suddenly withdrew from the partnership. Their reason was vague, but clear enough: the company had not followed the proper procedures. Everything Dara had built seemed to fall apart at once. When Min Ho found out, he called her into his office. His expression was hard, his voice sharper than she had ever heard. He demanded to know how this could have happened, reminding her how important the partnership was and how it was now collapsing because of mistakes. Dara tried to explain, but the words stuck in her throat. I don't know. I followed all the steps. Min Ho's eyes were stern. He told her this was unacceptable, that she had to take responsibility. Dara felt her stomach sink. She hadn't expected him to scold her like this. Heat rushed to her face, and she nodded silently, unable to defend herself any further. Before the tension could get worse, Ji Soo stepped forward and said she could help fix the problem. She mentioned she had handled similar situations before. Min Ho looked at her for a moment and then nodded. Ji Soo got to work right away. She contacted the supplier, checked the files, and organized everything. Within a few hours, the supplier agreed to continue, and the project was back on track. Dara felt even more embarrassed watching Ji Soo handle everything so perfectly. She tried to focus on her own work, but for the rest of the week, she kept her head down and avoided interactions with others. Min Ho noticed the change right away and couldn't ignore it. Every time he looked at Dara, he felt a pull of concern. Something had shifted between them, and he didn't like seeing her so quiet and withdrawn. Meanwhile, the truth was clear to Ji Soo. She had quietly deleted the files from the system and contacted the supplier personally, convincing them to withdraw their contracts by pointing out fake procedural errors. On the outside, she stayed polite and helpful in front of Min Ho and the staff, hiding the fact that she had been the cause of the entire problem. Dara had no idea she had been sabotaged. After work one evening, Min Ho walked over to Dara's desk. She looked up, unsure why he was there. He spoke first, his tone calm. He told her he wanted to apologize for how he had reacted about the contract. He admitted he had been angry and should not have scolded her the way he did. Dara frowned, still hurt. She asked if he really thought she was careless enough to ruin the contract, reminding him that she had followed every step. She said she still didn't understand what had gone wrong. Min Ho's expression softened, as he apologized sincerely. Dara studied him for a moment. She said it wasn't right to think so little of someone you worked with, even in anger. Min Ho agreed and promised to do better. With that, the tension between them eased slightly. Dara gave a small nod, feeling a little lighter, and they both returned to their work. Later that evening, Ji Soo called Mrs. Kim. She said that Min Ho had not been paying her much attention lately and explained that he spent a lot of time with Dara, a staff under him. Mrs. Kim's voice was sharp as she asked if Ji Soo was sure. Ji Soo answered that she had seen it for a while and that it felt wrong, considering the plans already made for her and Min Ho. Mrs. Kim told her she would handle it and asked Ji Soo to keep watching and report back if it continued. Ji Soo agreed and ended the call. While Min Ho was at home reviewing reports, his phone rang. He answered and heard his mother's voice on the other end. She told him she had heard he was spending too much time with an employee. Min Ho tried to explain it was only work, but she cut him off and reminded him of his duty. Ji Soo had been sent to work with him for a reason, and he needed to focus on that. Min Ho stayed quiet for a moment before admitting the truth. He said he liked Dara, that he had grown close to her, and wanted to be with her. His mother did not accept this. She told him clearly that he had to choose, either accept Ji Soo as his fiancée or give up his inheritance and his place in the company. Min Ho rubbed his face, struggling for words, but she did not leave room for discussion. She ended the call, leaving him sitting in silence with the weight of her warning heavy on his mind. In the days after the call with his mother, Min Ho buried himself in work, focusing on reports and meetings to keep his mind steady. He had no idea that, behind his back, plans were already being made. One morning, while he was away at a business meeting, Dara was suddenly called into the boardroom. Several directors were waiting, a stack of documents laid out neatly on the table. Records showed that company funds had been embezzled, and her name was written across the files. She was stunned, unable to understand how her name could be tied to something she had never done. The directors wasted no time. They told her the evidence was clear and that her employment was terminated with immediate effect. Dara tried to explain, insisting she had done nothing wrong, but no one was willing to listen. What she didn't know was that Mrs. Kim had arranged everything. They had planted the false documents and convinced the board that Dara was responsible. By the time Min Ho returned from his meeting, Dara had already been escorted out of the office. He had no idea she had been accused, judged, and dismissed all in his absence. When he came back and saw her desk empty, he asked around and found out she had been fired. He went to the directors to ask what had happened. Most of them gave no clear answer, but one director who he was close with told him the truth. Miho's jaw tightened as he called his mother. His voice was sharp with anger as he asked what she had done. She admitted it without hesitation, saying she had made sure Dara was removed. She said Dara had been too close to him and that ending her job was the only way to stop it. Miho ended the call, his mind racing. The anger at his mother collided with guilt for not being there to protect Dara. Miho left the office right away and drove to Dara's apartment. He couldn't wait, he needed to explain that none of this was her fault. When Dara opened the door, she looked surprised. She stepped aside slowly and said she hadn't been expecting him. Miho walked in and spoke quickly. He told her he was sorry, that his mother was behind everything. She had forced the board to fire her, and he hadn't been there to protect her. Dara crossed her arms and listened without saying a word. Then he went on. His mother was also pressuring him to marry Ji Soo. He explained that it wasn't what he wanted, but his family was pushing him. He admitted he should have told her earlier but didn't know how. Dara shook her head slowly. She said she had ignored the rumors about Ji Soo being his fiancé because he had never said anything himself. She hadn't wanted to believe gossip, but now it all made sense, why Ji Soo often dismissed her ideas and tried to push her aside. Dara looked straight at him. Her voice was firm as she said she would not be a pawn in his battles with his family. She told him she couldn't keep getting caught in the middle, and until he sorted things out, she wanted nothing to do with him. Miho stood there for a moment, wishing he could say more, but he knew she was right. He left the apartment carrying guilt in his heart, but also a new determination, to put things right and find his way back to her. The next day, Miho booked a flight to South Korea. A phone call wasn't enough, he needed to face his mother in person. When he arrived at the family home, he went straight inside and found Mrs. Kim waiting. She looked surprised to see him back so suddenly and asked why he had come. Miho told her he needed to talk to her directly, not through the phone. He took a deep breath and spoke to her, saying he would not marry Ji Soo. His life was his own, and no one could decide for him. Mrs. Kim listened without showing much reaction. Then she told him he was forgetting his duty to the family. The marriage, she said, was important for both sides, and he was expected to accept it. I understand the family needs, he replied steadily, but I will not sacrifice my personal happiness or force myself into a life I do not want. Mrs. Kim looked at him and told him he was clearly set on his choice, and since nothing would change his mind, he should do as he wished, but she warned that every decision comes with consequences. The talk had not been easy, but it was needed. He walked out of the house with a stronger resolve, ready to make things right with Dara and take back what had been unfairly taken from her. While Miho was still in South Korea, he reached out to someone he trusted in the company's IT and security team and asked them to review all the office records from the past few weeks. They found a footage of Ji Soo at Dara's desk when no one else was around, deleting files and changing supplier communications. The digital logs backed it up. It was undeniable evidence of her deliberate sabotage. Once everything was collected, Miho gave the order to share it with the board and senior staff. Word spread quickly through the office. The staff was stunned. Those who once doubted Dara now realized she had been innocent all along, and their respect for her grew, while Ji Soo's reputation and influence fell apart. Min Ho left South Korea and flew back to Abuja. As soon as he reached the city, he went straight to Dara's apartment. When he got there, he told her everything with his family had been settled, that his mother had agreed to let him decide for himself, and no one would stand in the way anymore. Min Ho then said what he had been holding back for so long. Dara, I like you and I want to know you better, spend time with you outside of work. I want us to be together if you feel the same way. Dara stayed quiet for a moment, then admitted she liked him too. Being with him wouldn't have been possible, but now that he had spoken with his mother, everything had changed. Min Ho smiled, feeling a sense of relief. Dara returned the smile, and in that moment, the past felt behind them and they could finally look forward to the future together.